I forgot to make an announcement, and I would hate for you guys to miss this amazing opportunity. But if you look in your bulletins, you'll notice that on June 15th, we have a Pleasant Grove Baptist Church fish fry / barbecue. A fish fry / barbecue. And this is a great time for us as a church to come together and just have fun. We're just going to have a good time on Saturday, June 15th, from 4 to 8 p.m. Now you might be saying, no, John, I'm only free from 4 to 4:15. Good. Come on, stop by, grab yourself a plate, head on out. But if you want to hang around the whole time, great. We'll have a volleyball net up. We'll have possibly some horseshoes. We'll have a great time of fellowship. You can stay as long or as short as you like, but please come out and join us on June 15th for our fish fry / barbecue. It's going to be a wonderful time. With that being said, we've been studying the book of Daniel. Today we're in the 3rd chapter of Daniel. And as we go through the book of Daniel, I don't want you just to take my word for it. I don't want you to sit here and go, well, John said it, we're good. I want you to study for yourself. Today, this week, go back and read Daniel chapter 3. Read Daniel chapter 3. With that, let's open with a word of prayer. Father God, as we look at Daniel chapter 3, open our eyes to the message that you have for us. Show us how it applies to our lives, and help us to live for you. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. When we look at Daniel chapter 3, I want you to understand that we're finding faith in the furnace. Because this is one of the most famous Bible stories next to the birth of Jesus. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego are thrown into the fiery furnace. And when I was a kid, we had this felt board, and we had these little people on little popsicle sticks, and they would walk, doop, 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 and then there'd be the fire, and then there's a fourth person. It was a wonderful story. But I would like us today to look at it from a different perspective. We're going to look at it from a different perspective. So in Daniel chapter 1 and 2, we see that Daniel was faithful. He was faithful that he wouldn't contaminate himself with the king's food in Daniel chapter 1. And then in Daniel chapter 2, we see Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. And Daniel interprets the dream. But he doesn't take credit. He says, God has given me this vision. So we see that Daniel, he was faithful and he was humble. The book of Daniel teaches us that we need to be faithful and we need to be humble. And in chapter 3, we read and we learn that we need to stand up for our faith. We need to stand up for our faith. In verses 1 through 7 of Daniel chapter 3, we see the pride of King Nebuchadnezzar. Because remember, he just had a dream that he was this head of this giant statue. The head was made of gold. And King Nebuchadnezzar was told that basically he's the best. And he's thinking about this dream, and he decides that he was going to build this statue from his dream. And it's going to be a huge statue. But there's one little difference. It's going to be made of gold. It's going to be this giant statue made of gold. And it's going to be over 90 feet tall. And people are going to be able to see it for miles around. But not only that, he's thinking about this statue and goes, you know what? I'm a pretty good guy. They can worship this statue. I'm like a god. He decided that not only will he build this statue, but that when music plays, the whole body of people around that can hear the music and see the statue would bow down. And if you didn't bow down, there'd be consequences. If you bow down, great, no problem. But if you decide that you just don't want to bow down, well, then we're going to cut you to pieces. Once again, Nebuchadnezzar goes to his old fallback. Just like in chapter 2, if you couldn't interpret the dream, well, tell the king what the dream was and interpret it. If you couldn't do that, what was he going to do? I'm going to cut you to pieces. Then I'm going to burn your stuff. So once again, in chapter 3 says, if they don't bow down, I'm going to throw you in the fiery furnace, and I'm going to burn your stuff. He's a very cruel king, but he has a big head. And this statue wasn't built in Babylon. What it was done, there was, they actually think they found the base of it outside of the city. And they believe that it wasn't a full golden statue. It's kind of like those Easter rabbits that you get at Easter. There's chocolate bunnies. And you always think, oh, it's solid chocolate. And you bite in it, and it's hollow. And you're like, oh, come on. And you get disappointed. This was the same kind of principle. Is at this time, in ancient times, what they would do is they would build a wooden structure, and then they would cover it in gold. And so one, weight, but also, that's a lot of gold. And so King Nebuchadnezzar goes out and decides that he's going to build this statue from his dream, and that people are going to worship him. And if they don't, they're going to be burned. That's what he decides. And you know what? The people are like, okay, let's do it. But here's the problem. Not everyone bows down. Read with me verses 8 through 12 of Daniel chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3, starting in verse 8. Therefore, at the time, certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. What happened is the music played, people bowed down, but not everybody. And so some people saw it and said, you know what? These Jews aren't bowing down. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psalter, and symphony, with all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up. There's always some people out to get other people. I worked at a job where this lady, she really wanted to be the manager. And so she was constantly attacking me, finding things, trying to find a fault with me. Even if there was no fault, she always wanted to get me in trouble. So she'd go to the general manager and go, you know, John was 5 minutes late today. I'm just saying, I noticed it. I was just doing my job, heading out the parking lot, and I noticed it 5 minutes late. I'm just saying. And the same kind of situation here. These men, they will probably want advancement, and they see these Jews who are not loved in Babylon, and they go, what is going on? Let's go tell the king. And they go, oh, great king! Remember how you made this wonderful rule? Well, there's some guys. They're not doing it. They're not following the king's command. And what was the big offense? What was their big offense? Verse 12. It says this. There are certain Jews whom have set over the affairs of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. These men, O king, have not paid regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up. Now, it's interesting that the complaint against them isn't that they just don't bow down, but they don't serve his gods, and they don't bow down. There's two complaints against Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abed-Nego. That they aren't following everyone else. They're not going into the temples of the false gods and paying sacrifice. They're outsiders. They're different. They're not like us. They stick out like a green thumb. And you know that there had to be more people than Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego not bowing down. But these three were singled out. For whatever reason, these men were singled out. They're different. So what does the king do? In verses 13 through 18, the king investigates. He wants to see what's going on. He hears a complaint, and like a good ruler, he goes, well, let's find out. And so the king questions Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. Look at verse 15. Verse 15 says this, now, if you're ready at the time you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, the psalter, and symphony with all kinds of music, you will fall down and worship the image which I've made. Good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning, fiery furnace. And pay attention to this last verse right here. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Out of his experience, his false gods have no power. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to give you a choice. Either worship when you hear the music, or you'll put in a fiery pit, and there's no one who's going to save you. Not even God can save you. Now, many of us are always tempted that when we're given a choice, we say, well, I don't need to do it. I don't need to do it in my heart. You know, we watch a movie with foul language, you go, well, as long as I'm not participating in the cussing, it's okay. As long as I'm not doing it. Well, it's a heart issue. These men could have easily said, you know what? I could just drop my pen. I hear the music, and all of a sudden, ting-ling-ling, oh, my paper! I must go get it. They bow down. They could have, we do that all the time at restaurants. Okay, let's pray for a meal. Oh, God, help us have a great meal. Oh. They could have easily done something like that. They could have dropped the pen. They could, oh, my sandal's untied. No one needed to know that they weren't bowing down. They could have faked it. Wouldn't it be better to fake it than die? Wouldn't it be better to say, well, you don't need to participate. You know, maybe find a pebble that you like on the ground. But they had a choice. They could either honor God and not worship, but be cast in a fiery furnace, or simply bow down. What's bowing down? We all do it all the time. Drop a piece of pepperoni on the ground. Oh, there it is. Bowing down is no big deal. But they knew that everyone around them would see them bow down and know that they were worshiping a false god. Even if they weren't in the heart, people would think, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, they worship a false god. They worship the image of King Nebuchadnezzar. And so they had to make a choice. Now, none of us, I do not believe that any of us have been put in a position where we had a choice, either life or death. I'm a salad. I hate pain. I like to call myself comfort sensitive. I like to be comfortable. I don't ever want to stub my toe because that's uncomfortable. When it's hot, I turn the air conditioning on. I was talking to some people this week and they said that they don't have their air conditioning on yet. That it has to get hot. Now I'm like 72, friends. That's what my house is set at. And you know what's set at in the winter? Around 68 to 72. He's going, I'm comfort sensitive. It took me 3 months to choose a pillow because I needed to buy a new pillow. I researched pillows about firmness, comfort. I tested pillows. And I got a pillow I'm very happy with it. I go to a hotel, I bring a pillow with me. I'm going to a board of directors meeting Monday and Tuesday. I get to stay over at Camp Caraway. They have wonderful pillows. And you know what? I'm going to bring my pillow. And I'm going to bring my little fan that blows air on me at night. And I carry this giant suitcase, and there's a pillow and a fan and a shirt and a pair of pants. But people look at me like, how long are you staying? And I'm like, yup. But you know what? I'm going to be comfortable. To be faced with a choice of death over bowing down started to look really good. And I cook and I burn my fingers, and it hurts. To be think that I'm going to be burned alive, that's a horrible way to die. It's easy to bow down. It's easy to bend over. But they made a choice. Nebuchadnezzar says, no God can save you. you're going to die if you don't bow down. And verses 16 through 18, we see their response to King Nebuchadnezzar. In verse 16, read with me. It says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the golden image which you have set up. That is one of the greatest responses in the whole Bible. Let it be known, O king. Listen here, Nebuchadnezzar. You want to kill us if we don't bow down? Well, I'm not going to give you an answer because I'm not bowing down. And God's going to save us. Top that. But if he doesn't, so be it. A lot of times we expect, because we're Christians, that we have to pass. That God will rescue us. And there's a verse in the New Testament that's taken out of context constantly, and it's a thorn in my side. It's a pet peeve I have. Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You know what? Listen. Stand in front of a running Mack truck, and you can do all things through strength, or you get run over. But God will make me a brick wall. No, you'll be flat like a pancake. I can jump off the top of the church, so I can do all things through God who strengthens me. You're going to break your legs. There's gravity. There are laws of nature. God gave you a brain. Just because a verse says something and you want to take it out of context doesn't mean it's true. What that verse is talking about, when you look at the verses before it, it's talking about you can be content. No matter what situation God puts you in, you can be content. And that's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego are living out. They say, God, he can save us, King Nebuchadnezzar. If he wants to, boom, we're saved. But if he doesn't, no, I'm not bowing down and I'm not worshiping your false gods. No, that I'm going to stand for truth, even if it means death. They didn't put God, they didn't test God, they didn't put him in a corner where God had to choose a side. They said, you know, no matter what happens, King Nebuchadnezzar, if he saves us, he can. But if he doesn't want to, so be it. I'm still not worshiping your God. I still choose death. What a testimony. What kind of faith would lead them to choose to die rather than turn their back on God? The kind of faith it takes to say, I'd rather die than bow down and turn my back on my God. And if he wants to save me, great. If he doesn't, so be it. So what does King Nebuchadnezzar do? Read with me verse 19. It says, Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than usual. Verse 20. And he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego and cast them in the burning furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, their other garments, and they were cast in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, this is verse 22, therefore, because the king's command was urgent, and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. The fire was so hot, the king was enraged. He was just disrespected in front of everyone. These Jews who don't worship his God, don't bow down to him, disrespected him. And he was angry with them. And he said, it's not just going to be a fiery furnace. It's going to be 7 times hotter than it needs to be. And when they went, they tied him up and they went to throw him in. They were not prepared for this. They had their full clothing on. And before they were tossed in, the heat was such that their captors burnt alive, but they didn't. What a sight that must have been when King Nebuchadnezzar says, "Guards, throw them in." And the men walking with them are burned alive while Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego are standing there. The heat is such that the men, his guards, were burned alive. And then in verse 23, read with me verse 23. It says this, "And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace." Verse 24. It says this, "Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, 'Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?' And they answered and said to the king, 'True, O king.'" Verse 25. "Look," he answered, "I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." Think about this. Their cords would have burned for them to be walking around free. But they're not burned. Their clothes aren't burned. Not only that, there's 4 men walking. The guards that went to throw them, they're dead. The only damage is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. They don't have their cords on anymore. The ropes that bound them are gone, and they're walking around the fiery furnace. I can't imagine what it must have been like. Knowing that you're going to die, you see people die around you, but then you're falling, you hit the ground, and you're like, I'm not dead yet. You know, walking around, I don't think there's any special significance that they're walking around the fiery furnace. I think that if I was thrown in the fiery furnace and I wasn't dead, and I was not burning, I'd probably take a look around and say, what's going on over here? Not so hot over here. Kind of cool over here. But more than that, there was a 4th like the Son of God. Because remember what King Nebuchadnezzar said? No God can save you. No God can save you from this. And then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego tell the king, if our God wants to, he can, but if he doesn't, we're ready to die. They were reserved to the fact that they might die. King Nebuchadnezzar knew they were going to die. But here they are, walking around. And what does he say? There's a 4th man with them who looks like the Son of God. Verses 26 and 27, it says this. Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego came from the midst of the fire, and the satraps, the administrators, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together, and they saw that these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair on their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. Not only did they get out unscathed, they didn't smell like fire. I don't know if any of you ever smelled fire burn. I was a wild child, and I went to a Boy Scout camp, and there was one of our scout mates. He wasn't the brightest kid in the world, and we liked to play practical jokes on him. And we were playing with the lighter, going, it doesn't sound right. When you light it, it doesn't sound right. Now, we tilt the lighter a little so it wouldn't touch your head, and see what it sounds like. He tilted his head, turned that lighter on, and boom, there goes his hair. He had a big bald spot on the side of his head. We all thought it was funny. That smell was wretched. I mean, it smelled bad. And we also got sent home early from camp. I can't imagine why. It was fine. He just had a bald spot. But the smell of burning hair is horrible. They didn't smell anything on it. If you go sit at a campfire for an hour and you come inside, you smell like campfire. They did not have anything on them that smelled bad. They had nothing on them that said they were in the fire. But you know what's even more impressive? Verse 28. Verse 28, I think, is significant. It says, Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, who's sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own. Verse 29. Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego shall be cut to pieces, and their houses shall be made into ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. Once again, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego are faithful. Faithful servants of God. And King Nebuchadnezzar sees this. Sees this and says, there's no other God like this. There's no other God like this. He said that in chapter 2. But yet, what did he do? He turns back on God. He sees this after Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego goes, there is an almighty God, and no one can speak against him, or I'm going to cut them to pieces, burn their stuff. Because 3 men were faithful, the faithless saw God. Because 3 men were faithful, the faithless saw God. These men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, they were promoted. At the end, the king, in verse 30, says the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego to the province of Babylon. Their faithfulness to God led to blessing. The faithfulness to God led to blessing. These 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, they had a chance to hide their faith. They could have dropped a piece of paper. They could have saw a shiny pebble and easily bowed down and worshipped a false god. No one would know but them that it wasn't true. But they chose not to. They chose to keep their faith. They chose to reveal who they were, believers in God, regardless of the outcome. They chose to stand for Christ. They stood for God. They stood for God, knowing that they may be persecuted. Today, we have a chance every day to either stand for what we believe in or turn our back on it and keep it to ourselves. We have a chance to be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. We could stand for what we believe, or we can turn our back and go our other way. And what I'm talking about is sharing our faith. It's easy to go to a grocery store, to walk in and walk out without anyone knowing that you're a believer. It's easy to do that. It's easy right now for you guys to go to the farmhouse, have lunch, and leave. And people who you don't know will never know that you're a believer. Never knew you just came from church. You can go to work every day of your life and not let your other coworkers know that you're a believer. No one be any wiser. Or you can be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego and stand for your faith. Do what's right, but more importantly, witness to them. Share your faith with them. The whole point of Christianity isn't just being a good Christian. It's sharing our faith with the lost. That is the point of being a Christian, is to share the gospel message with others. But so many times, we hide our faith. We decide not to let people know. We might be made fun of. We might lose friends. We might lose our job. We might lose popularity. Some of our friends might not want to come out and hang out with us anymore. So we hide our faith. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego were faced with the option of hiding their faith or dying. Our consequences for sharing our faith is a lot less scary. None of it compares to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. But yet fear, the fear of what might happen, keeps us from sharing our faith. I have a challenge for you this week. I want each of us in this room, if you say that you're a Christian, if you say, John, I do believe in Jesus, that He died for my sins and rose again, this is my challenge. You share your faith with one person this week. Just one person. No excuses. 7 days. You could share it with 7 people. But I'm going to ask you to share your faith with just one person. Be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego and take a step of faith. Share your faith with just one person. Let's pray. Father God, as we close out our service today, help us to be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego and stand for what we believe in, regardless of the consequences. Help us to stand for what we believe in, regardless of the consequences. Amen. As we sing our last song, I want you to think about this. Are you willing to stand for what you believe in? Are you willing to stand for what you believe in? Please turn to page 9.